Welcome back, and thank you so much for choosing Morning Live. Now, community media builds active citizenry, the power of communication and information. It shows us how it can enable citizens to participate in and also influence decision making. And this will be one of the main focuses at this year's inaugural Media Development and Diversity Community Summit, which will take place today at Ekurhuleni, east of Johannesburg here in Gauteng. Now, the Deputy Minister of Communications, Kekana, is with us this morning to tell us a little bit more about this conference. Deputy Minister, good morning, and thanks so much for coming through.
Good morning, Sakina, and good morning to Morning Live viewers.
Perhaps a good place to start would be just to define a community media. When we talk about community media, what exactly are we talking about?
Look, community media is a tool that communities are able to communicate their voice and indicate their stance on various issues using their own community media to communicate that. The content, the views of the community come through their own indigenous language, and they're able to communicate some of the things that happen. And we want, as government, want to revitalize those kind of institutions and make sure that they become sustainable. Remember, if we go a step back, Sakina, in those days, our people were able to get to know how they are being infiltrated and their land is being dispossessed through Kuranta Bechwana, through Ntate Solplaki in those days. The drum magazine, the old Net Nakasa was able to communicate most of the things using community magazine drum in those days. You look at Radio Freedom, how our people were able to listen to the voice of the leadership, and they were able to be hopeful and fight and continue to make sure that the liberation of South Africa continues. So these were tools that were used in those days to make our people to communicate amongst themselves, but also to bring together various communities and make sure that the struggle continues. So it can be that today we have community media collapsing under our nose. We have to see how we sustain it, but we also have to see how we deal with governance issues that may be confronting.
So just to that point, Deputy Minister, how is government supporting community media initiatives?
Currently, you know, the MDDA has some form of stipends that they give for them to be able to buy tools, studios, and put all those things, which is not enough. But there's also a decision by government that has said in media bulk buying, 30% of that should be set aside for community media. So through GCIS, whatever media bulk buying we're doing, we have to make sure that print, radio, as well as TV, 30% is set aside for community media. The challenge has been the governance issues and compliance issues by them, because once your SARS issues are not right, there's no way that government can be able to procure from you. So those are the things that we have to also look at. But the other issue, it's the legitimacy of some of these community media entities, because somewhere it's Sakina and Pinky coming together under the auspices of community media or community radio. So we're working now very close with municipalities to say, let's legitimize some of these community media bodies, your radios, your print and TV. Let's see how you guys can work very closely with them, make sure that the governance issues, the boards are running correctly, and even those who are running it on day-to-day basis have that capacity to make sure that everything is done above board.
It's good to know that government is aware of some of these challenges, Deputy Minister. So what happens in the instance where someone is running a community media entity as their personal fiefdom?
Well, we have made rounds immediately with the Minister of Communications to various provinces, even before our budget speech. And these were some of the things that we are picking up. We're happy that community members are starting to see that these are entities that should be closer to them, and they should also be able to support them. But we took it a step further and said, because these community media are very close to municipalities, municipalities play a role in making sure that you support them, but you even assist us in putting together governance issues. The boards, when that election of boards and other things happen, make sure that you coordinate, you are part of that, so that you are the closest government institution that can actually support our community media or community radio. And we gave them an example. We said, look, if Parliament is able to buy airtime through SABC or any other media platform for them to make sure that whatever happens in Parliament is live, municipalities can also do the same by making sure that decisions that councillors take at municipal level are live on radio, and every member in the ward is able to know what his or her councillor was saying in a council meeting. So in that way, you bring the municipality closer to the people, but also people will start to monitor decisions that you took in a council meeting through that platform. So those are some of the things that we're looking at.
And the challenges are many here, Deputy Minister, so it would be very interesting to see what the summit ultimately concludes with regard to, these oversight roles and strengthening that, because we also know that a lot of these community radio stations, for example, they were shut down by Centec, and then they were eventually reconnected, but it speaks to a cash flow problem amongst other things. You spoke about governance, the oversight, the accountability roles that need to be taken into account. But there is, of course, also DTT, and this will have an impact on community stations. And looking at the theme for this summit, the inaugural summit, taking community media to the future. And I think therein, lies another huge challenge. But what is your thinking just at this generic stage in that regard?
Look, already we are migrating digital on TV through your mainstream media. And obviously, even community media should also migrate. And now the issue of digital literacy, even before we start to look at other things, become critical, because we must be ready for the fourth industrial revolution, and community media cannot also be closed down or left out. In fact, that's the right word I must use, that we can't leave them out on the migration purposes. So if you look at what is happening, people no longer watch TV sometimes by watching it, and in that way they are using other platforms to watch TV, they are using other platforms to read newspapers and all other things. So we cannot also leave community media in that regard. We have to now start to say, how then do we digitize you, and how do we go along those lines? But also digital literacy then becomes very important, not only for community media, but even for our communities, to start to also be in upkeep with what is happening in
Minister,
the environment.
You know what, thank you so much for stopping by, and I'll get the details of how the public can, of course, participate here in any form, and then I'll put that out to you. But thanks to Deputy Minister of Communications, Pinky Kekana, for chatting to us about the upcoming summit. And of course, the polls in Zimbabwe, 2 minutes and counting.